What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Gameweek 36 deadline. So I'm going to talk about the lineups for Spurs and Chelsea from last night, thoughts on some of the key players from those teams as well, go through some of the press conference information we've had before I've started recording. Because it's a Friday deadline, I can't wait for all the press conferences to happen, but I've tried to cover what we have available, and then I'll answer some of your questions as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. All right, let's start with the Spurs lineup for last night where they lost 2-0 to Chelsea. There's really three key areas to discuss. So one is Emerson Royal coming in at left back instead of Ben Davies. Ben Davies is probably out for the season. Now, Emerson Royal is only 4.3 million, and in that position, he does invert into midfield. So at times, he does get forward. And I think his minutes are pretty safe in terms of starts. Lo Celso has come on and played in that more left-back role when they've been chasing games over the last couple. But I don't think that's a huge thing to worry about from the start. Would I buy Emerson Royal? I guess if you were really stuck for funds, you could go there. But preferably you go and buy Pedro Porro instead, who's a bit more money obviously on the right, more attacking than Emerson Royal. Or even Romero, scored against Arsenal. I know he got a bit lucky in terms of the David Raya mistake, but he had a few chances outside of that. And he also did last night. He should have scored against Chelsea from a set piece from a cross from Pedro Porro. It went just past the post. So I actually quite like him in terms of goal threat. But I think ultimately nobody is buying Spurs players this week for Liverpool away. But I would keep an open mind for Game Week 37. Things don't look great for Spurs right now. 3 losses in a row. But one was Newcastle away. One was against Arsenal. You know, top 2 teams in the league. Sorry, Arsenal are a top 2 team in the league this year. And then Chelsea last night. And to be fair to Chelsea, I know over the season they've struggled a bit in terms of league position and stuff like that, but they were really good against Villa and they were really good against Spurs again last night, especially in the first half. So I don't think we should write Spurs off. I wouldn't want to bring their players in against Liverpool, but in the last 2 game weeks of the season, they get to play Burnley at home and Sheffield United away, and then I would just see the Man City fixture as a bit of a bonus. So although you might not want their players this week, I'd keep an open mind for Game Week 37. The other 2 things is Kulusevski played number 10 instead of James Maddison. James Maddison was on the bench. That's the first time he's been benched while fit all season. That is not a good sign. I think ultimately if you've got a spare transfer over the next couple of weeks, it's probably going to be worth getting rid of James Maddison. I don't know if I would force him out for a hit just yet, unless you're really stuck for getting 7 attackers out this week, especially if you just wildcarded, because you can just bench James Maddison, see what happens against Liverpool, and then go from there in Game Week 37. I wouldn't be completely surprised to see Maddison come back into the team. It's not that Kulusevski was terrible, but Spurs overall just weren't any better for him being taken out of the side. I mean, it's not like he massively impressed when he came on, but he wasn't completely awful either. So I would try and give Maddison 1 more week before you make a decision. But I'll tell you right now, if you've wildcarded in 35 and you were looking at your team with 37 thinking, I don't really have any moves to make, James Maddison is going to be the player you sell for whoever you don't own out of, I don't know, Bruno if he's fit, Gordon, De Bruyne, Foden, maybe even Richarlison as well. That's the last position I wanted to talk about. He came back into the side last night and started, got about 63 minutes before he went off. Not one to buy this week for all the reasons I've already mentioned. Liverpool is not a great fixture anyway. But if he starts again against Liverpool, that then looks like a nice differential for the double, where they get Burnley and Man City at home, then Sheffield United away last day of the season. Because I think Spurs probably are a better side with him in that position. Didn't get a huge amount of chances last night. But like I said, Chelsea were much better in the first half. Spurs did come into it in the second half. But obviously Richarlison's only just back from injury, so he didn't get the whole game, to affect it further into the second half. But if he gets another 60 to 70 minutes against Liverpool, I really like him as a differential going into Game Week 37. We've discussed differentials a lot over the last week or so. There's not a huge amount about, but Richarlison is a genuine one. Either way, Son should be good for minutes. Didn't get a huge amount of chances last night. I wouldn't be particularly worried about him. If you want to bench him this week, absolutely go ahead. But I think I'd want to keep him going into 37. Brennan Johnson started on the right, moved to the left when Richarlison went off and Son went through the middle. But he's not one to buy. You could maybe keep hold of him. But Spurs could line up with Son on the left, Richarlison through the middle, Maddison number 10 and Kulusevski on the right at some point. I just don't think Brennan Johnson is someone to buy. So don't panic on Spurs too much. I know it's not been great and they might get another loss this week, but they have got a couple of good fixtures remaining. I think for the most part, if you can, just give Game Week 36 a chance to, just get through Game Week 36, then make decisions ahead of 37. But yeah, Maddison, I suspect if people have got a spare transfer, he's got to go. All right, let's talk about the Chelsea lineup from last night as well. Now, they are definitely running on fumes when it comes to senior players that are available. If you saw the bench from last night, there's not really too many names on there that you would recognise, unless you're a diehard Chelsea fan, of course. So the 11 that played last night are probably going to be the 11 that line up at the weekend as well. And obviously, Thursday to Sunday turnaround is not that long. It is a home game, though. I think they'll get chances against West Ham because West Ham defence is just not all that great. But maybe there will be an element of tiredness for Chelsea unless they can get some players back. So Jackson was up front again. It was Madueke and Mudryk on the wings and Cole Palmer playing number 10. That will probably be the front four for West Ham. I don't think they're due any players back, and Kunku wasn't on the bench last night. So if anyone's still worried about him coming back, I just wouldn't be. Nicholas Jackson is going to continue to start, and I think looks like a good option. Yes, he only got one goal over the double, but he got a few chances, right? On another day, he could have come away with more returns. For anyone thinking of a punt on Madueke or Mudryk, I don't mind it, but I guess it depends which midfielder you're giving up, because midfield is quite a strong position in FPL for options over the last 3 game weeks. I think if I was going to go for one, I'd go for Madueke. I think he's playing better than Mudryk. He looks probably like a better player. I think Mudryk's got potential, but we're not really seeing it yet. And Pochettino was also praising Madueke after the game as well. Conor Gallagher, I know, has got a few returns over the double, but I still probably wouldn't look there. In terms of defenders, Cucurella actually thinks looked pretty good over the last couple of games. Obviously, he got the own goal, very unfortunate, but he does get into quite a few attacking positions. And until Colwell or Chilwell are back, I don't think really there's a huge issue there. And similar with Petrovic, right? As a Petrovic owner, and I'm sure a lot of people are like this, you're a little bit worried about Robert Sanchez. He's not even on the bench yet. I'm not sure there's a major issue there. I think if you had to buy a goalkeeper for double game week 37 and you wanted to go for Petrovic, I don't hate it. I can't guarantee you that he won't miss a game, but the further we get on, the less likely that looks like it's going to happen. Especially with Sanchez not even in the squad. And also, Chelsea haven't had the season I'm sure they were hoping for under Pochettino, but they have got a late push now to finish 6th, ahead of Man United and Newcastle. It's definitely possible, the position they're in. They're playing well. The fixtures aren't bad either. Man United, defensive shambles, right? They give up chances all the time. It could happen. So, are people going to be invested in Chelsea this week? West Ham at home? Probably not. I feel like this is, out of the 3 game weeks remaining, this is the one where maybe people are going to be a little bit passive in general. Just roll the transfer, wait until the double, and then go from there. But you could, if you needed a player and you wanted someone for the double. I quite like Chelsea's fixtures. West Ham at home this week. Then the double is 2 away games, but it's Forest and Brighton. And then it's Bournemouth at home, last game of the season. So if you wanted to invest, I don't think it's a problem. I think the key players really are Jackson, Palmer, who everyone owns anyway, and then Cucurella or Petrovic. But if you want to take a punt on a midfielder, it'd probably be Madueke for me. So I'm just going to add something on the end here, because I've just realised I completely forgot to mention Gusto, who obviously a lot of people own. He wasn't even in the squad last night for Chelsea, which is not a great sign for Game Week 36. There was a post on Twitter, and I can't remember who it came from. I think it was one of the Chelsea fan channels or big Chelsea Twitter account, something like that, who spoke to Gusto at the training ground, and he said he was hoping to be back for the West Ham game. The fact that he wasn't even in the squad last night means that's probably unlikely. I think if you've got 3 other defenders you can play this week instead, I'd maybe hold Gusto and get more of an update ahead of game week 37. But if he's a doubt going into 37, I would just sell him, and probably not for a Chelsea defender. There is maybe a case to sell him this week. Like I said, if you've got a bunch of injuries and, one of the defenders you're having to play is Porro against Liverpool away or something like that, and you've got a spare transfer, I'd maybe just deal with Gusto now and just get rid of him. Because I think even if he comes back from injury, I said this a week or so ago, he always seems to have some kind of knock or some kind of issue which may or may not keep him out of a game. So I think it depends how strong your squad is looking right now in terms of what you do with him. If you really want to just stick with the Chelsea defence, which I don't think is completely terrible, I'd go for probably Cucurella at this point. But I think for most people, you're probably going to look elsewhere. So Gusto, unfortunately, we didn't really get an update, and we're probably not going to hear from Pochettino again today, but it's not looking great for a start in 36. So the big news that's come out this morning is Fabian Schär is likely to miss the final 4 games of the season for Newcastle. This is what Eddie Howe has said. Fabian will miss a period of time with a minor hamstring problem. He won't be available tomorrow, so that's game week 36 against Burnley away, and I doubt we'll see him again this season. Now, the fact that Eddie Howe says, I doubt we'll see him again, is a glimmer of hope that he will feature at some point, but obviously there isn't much confidence there. And game week 37 is not too far away. Like this time next week, we'll be making decisions for game week 37. And this time in 2 weeks, we'll be 2 days away from the season ending. So it's not looking great for Schär. I guess this is the same as any other decision you've got to make. If you have 3 other good defenders that you can play this week, and you can just bench Schär, then you can get an update ahead of game week 37. You can get the not just on him, but obviously on everyone else as well, and go into the double with the most amount of information you're going to get. Like for my team, for example, I got super lucky going for Dan Burn instead. But let's just say that Dan Burn was injured this week. I'd still play Gabriel and Saliba, and I would just probably play Dallo instead and give myself another week's worth of information, right? It's not just about Fabian Schär you're waiting for. It's about everyone else. For anyone that's in a position where they're really stuck for players this week and they probably just need to get rid of him, it's actually quite tricky in terms of who to go for if you want a double game week player as well. I'd be quite tempted to look at maybe Man City, so you could go for Gvardiol or Walker. Obviously, Wolves at home this week, double in 37. And then if I just remind myself, West Ham at home, last day of the season. Can I guarantee you 4 starts from 4 games for Man City defenders? Absolutely not. But they are one of the strongest defences in the league. If you want double game week players, I mean, you could go to Dan Burn. He's the most nailed on now of all the Newcastle defenders. But there has to be questions about whether anyone should want Newcastle defence. They're so, hit by injuries at the moment. I'm just not sure it's worth it. I've got Dan Burn. I'm not going to do anything with him, right? I'm going to play him against Burnley probably and then play him in the double. But that's because I already own him, so it's just not worth a transfer out. I'm not sure I would go to Newcastle now. Like Man United, I mean, I don't think there's a clean sheet against Palace away, and I'm not sure there's one against Arsenal or Newcastle at home either. But if you want a double gaming player that's going to play both games, you've got Dallo. He's definitely an option. As I've already said, Brighton I probably wouldn't go there. Cucurella maybe. Or you just get another Arsenal defender, and if you haven't already got 2, they are probably the ones to look at. So not looking great for Fabian Schär. Just a little bit of other information from Newcastle. Eddie Howe said Almiron and Joelinton return this week. Their steps back into full team training. We've also seen Nick Pope as well. So it's been a good week. It's certainly given us a big lift. So they're starting to get players back fit. I think on Nick Pope, I think we will see him before the end of the season. I'm just not sure about exactly when. And I'm sure he's going to want to get into the England squad as well. I think it's the same with Dubravka. You just take it week by week. You keep him if you've got him, and you don't buy him if you don't, and just leave it at that. Eddie Howe said, we'll see after today if they're available for Burnley. I've got to make the right decisions individually and for the team. So there's even a chance they could be in the squad this week, which means there's a good chance they'll be back for 37. But you just never fully know with Eddie Howe. So I think with Dubravka, if you want to play him this week, you're probably okay. But Fabian Schär, the big one. Let me know in the comments below, is there any defenders I've missed? There probably is, right? Because I'm literally reacting to this right now. Like, it's just come out like 5 minutes ago. There's probably is someone, but I think Arsenal are always going to be the go-to if you haven't already doubled up because they're just so strong. So we got a few injury updates from Erik ten Hag yesterday. And the interesting player that was mentioned, which I don't think people were expecting, is Bruno Fernandes. So he said, then also after the game, so he's talking about after Burnley, we had an issue with Bruno Fernandes. So he is a doubt for Monday, which is game week 36 against Palace away. But he will fight to be a part of this game, as we know with Bruno. Never rule him out of any game, and he has given his best to be available. So Bruno Fernandes is currently flagged and a doubt for that Crystal Palace game. I'm not sure what the injury is. I'm not sure how bad it is. There didn't seem to be anything else that Erik ten Hag gave away. My instinct is that he will play because Bruno Fernandes always plays. I don't think he's missed a single match through injury for Man United so far. We had this, I believe, at the end of, I don't know if it was the end of last season or maybe the start of this season, but there was that picture he put up on Instagram and he had his foot up on the sofa and everyone was a little bit worried and he just played, right? I'd be surprised if he misses out because it's just not the type of player he is. All I would say is, if you were thinking about bringing him in, this is probably a good excuse to wait another week ahead of game week 37. And if you've got a benching headache and you're genuinely not sure what to do this week, maybe this is the info you needed to make a decision, right? Have the excuse that Bruno Fernandes is yellow flagged. He is a doubt because Erik ten Hag's literally said it. Therefore, I'm going to bench him. I think, just as a side note, especially if you wildcard in the 35, you're probably really struggling with who to put on the bench. I think most of it is just a coin flip decision between Jackson, Son, Fernandes, Gordon, etc. They're all really good options. I don't know. Right now, at the time of recording, I'm probably going to put Bruno Fernandes on the bench because of this. But by the deadline tonight, I might have changed my mind. It's just such a close decision. I hate benching penalty takers, but I keep looking at Gordon with Burnley away, thinking I've got to play him. But anyway, that's a side note. We're talking about Man United. Bruno Fernandes is out. There wasn't a huge amount else in it. Like Scott McTominay didn't train so far this week. No one's buying him for FPL. Johnny Evans has returned to team training. And tomorrow we'll see if it is enough before the 2 days before the game. Obviously, they're not. I guess the thing with Monday is we're going to get less info. We're not going to get much more info before the deadline because it's a Friday deadline, but it's also more time to recover. Johnny Evans is not going to massively affect Harry Maguire, I don't think, so don't panic about that. Anthony Martial was partly in team training. He's never going to be available anyway. And Marcus Rashford's still absent. So in terms of those of you with, who's the player? Garnacho, his minutes look great right now. If you've got him, I would keep him. And if you're struggling for cash and you want to buy a Man United attacker, I would just get Garnacho over Fernandes. I think Fernandes is probably the better option, but you pay a lot more for that. And obviously, he is now a doubt, like I said. So unfortunately, I can't tell you any more than I think he'll probably play because this is Bruno Fernandes. But I also think it's a great excuse to not buy him or maybe even bench him this week. All right, let's talk about Liverpool next. Jurgen Klopp said that Diogo Jota is not in team training yet. So in terms of minutes for the likes of Luis Diaz, that looks pretty good. It also helps players like Darwin Núñez, but the problem is Gakpo's been getting a bit of game time recently. So I'm not sure I would go there. And I think Darwin Núñez is still perfectly fine to sell if you own him. But ultimately, I don't think anyone's buying Liverpool attackers this week. Conor Bradley is in training, so potentially there's an effect on Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I just don't see it. There's large gaps between games now for Liverpool. I think Trent will start every single one. He might come off early in some of them, but I don't think it's a huge issue. The big news is that Virgil van Dijk hasn't trained. I feel like there's just a curse on FPL defenders at the moment. So he's a doubt for Spurs at home in 36. That obviously helps Spurs attackers. I think Klopp said that he's hoping to partially train today. So there is a chance that he'll be available for game week 36. And he's not someone that regularly misses games, but that is a problem. I think I've talked about defenders enough in this video, so I'm not going to go through possible replacements, but same old argument. Do you have the 3 other defenders that you can play instead? Were you hoping to keep hold of Van Dijk? If not, just get rid of him now. On the issue between Klopp and Salah, Klopp said, completely resolved, no problem. We knew each other for that long and respect each other so much. I just don't think that's something that's going to rumble on anyway, and it's good to hear Klopp say that. I think with Salah, my opinion from earlier in the week still stands. If I had him, I'd keep him. I think he's a massive differential now for Spurs at home. They will give up chances. I think going into 37, it's probably quite hard to keep hold of him, especially if you're bench boosting, because you're going to need the money. But unless there's 2 moves you need to make this week, I don't think there's many single game week midfielders that are better than Salah. Like, you could say there's midfielders that are better over the last 3 game weeks, but this week in particular, I'd much rather roll the transfer into 37 than get rid of Salah. I just think he's such a big differential now. Klopp also said pressure is off. It would be nice if we could play our best football again. And I think that's something I thought about this morning while I was walking the dog. You know how we go through beach theory, like which teams on the beach got nothing to play for? I really think you can frame it both ways. Like, if a team's got nothing to play for, maybe they're worth targeting or ignoring in terms of picking their players for FPL. But also there's less pressure and you can almost play with the shackles off. I just would not be surprised if we see a bit of a turnaround from Liverpool this year. I don't think it's an easy game. Like I've said, I wouldn't write Spurs off or anything like that. I don't know. If I had Salah, I'd be doing everything I could to keep him. Even if the plan's to sell him in 37, I would just wait and do it then instead. All right, let's get into some of your questions. So what are your thoughts on going for Trent Alexander-Arnold over an Arsenal defender, presumably for the last 3 game weeks? Now, neither Liverpool or Arsenal have any double game weeks remaining. I think if you're looking at clean sheet potential, you definitely put Arsenal as the favourites, right? They've been the strongest defence all year. Bournemouth and Everton at home to come in their last 3 games, still going for the title. It's definitely more chance. That being said, if you've got the money to go for Trent instead, and it doesn't impact any of your transfers remaining this season, i.e. it's not going to block a player you want in Game Week 37 or Game Week 38, then I really like him as a differential. And I think for someone looking to climb up the ranks or overtake in the mini league where they've got a bit of a deficit to make up, I really like him. Like, I don't see a huge amount of clean sheets for Liverpool over the last 3 games. Spurs at home this week, you'd expect Spurs to score. Villa away in 37, you'd expect Villa to score in that as well. And then Wolves at home last day of the season, there's maybe a chance. But obviously you've got the attacking potential on top for Trent, and he is a massive differential. He does cost 8.4, so he's expensive. But like I said, you'd have to figure out whether that's going to impact you over the last few weeks. And at that point, you pray that Arsenal concede, because Arsenal ownership is so high that if you've only got one defender, it's still better for you if they concede rather than get a clean sheet, because so many people have got double defence. And it's not impossible that Bournemouth, Man United and Everton all score past them, but also the odds will say that Arsenal are probably going to pick up another 1 or 2 clean sheets before the end of the season. So it's easy for me to say go and do it because I'm sat there with double Arsenal and I've got no plans to get Trent whatsoever. But in terms of defenders, without a double game week, I guess, he's got to be the biggest differential out there. And you could argue that there's no defender with a double that is better anyway. Like, how many attacking defenders that are going to get clean sheets? Like, Porro's going to concede. Man United are going to concede. Dan Burn might get a clean sheet against Brighton in Game Week 37. Attacking threat is not massive. No one wants a Brighton defender. Chelsea defender, like, who's buying Cucurella right now, you know? And Gusto's obviously probably not going to be available for Game Week 36. Who knows for 37? So I think Trent's a massive differential if you can afford it. So Walker or Gvardiol until the end of the season. I think in terms of starts and minutes, you can probably just about edge towards Kyle Walker as the better option. There is a chance that they see the same amount of starts over the last 4 matches, but I think if I had to bet on one, it'd probably be Walker. But I think Gvardiol is a little bit more attacking, and a few weeks ago, he was the second option after Ruben Dias, who I wouldn't buy right now. So I'm just going to stick to Gvardiol. Ultimately, whichever Man City defender you pick will probably go wrong anyway. If you've got a gut feeling towards one or the other, go for them because it's pretty close. But I'm just going to stick to Gvardiol. So what would you prioritise? Higher FPL ranking or mini league places? Now, I think for the most part, these go hand in hand. If you're doing really well in terms of overall rank, you're probably doing well in mini leagues as well. But there can be some subtle differences, especially towards the end of the season. So for example, if you said to me, I'm just outside the top 100k and I want to try and push into it, I'm buying a Man City midfielder this week, who do I go for? Well, I'd probably say De Bruyne over Foden, if you can afford it, because his overall ownership is lower and therefore he's more of a differential to try and push you up. But in a mini league, if the person you're chasing down in first place already owns De Bruyne, but they don't have Foden, then Foden is a differential for that league. Even though he might not be for overall rank, he could be for your mini league. So you need to decide what's more important to you and then just go for it, right? And if it's your league, you need to see what other FPL managers have in terms of ownership. Because if someone doesn't have Haaland, okay, he's owned by tons of people in the overall game, but he's a differential in your mini league. So that's the kind of thing you need to look at. I can't tell you what to prioritise. That's completely up to you. For me, it's pretty much these days always overall rank because I run a YouTube channel. And although I don't think you need great ranks to make content, it definitely helps in terms of staying sane with the comments and stuff like that. Because if I have a really bad season, everyone's going to mention it. Everyone's going to talk about it next year. So it makes more sense for me to focus on that. And I'm not massively invested in most of the mini leagues that I'm in. Like the one that I first started when I first started playing FPL with my mates, like I tend to win that because I just put more thought into the game than they do, right? You think that would be the case when you run a YouTube channel. So I tend to win that like most seasons. And then the only other one that I'm really interested in winning is my own one, right? The Let's Talk FPL mini league. But the problem is there's over 100,000 people. So unless you're doing really well in terms of overall rank, like you'll probably have to be top 100 to win that league. Like that's how competitive it is. And obviously I'm nowhere near that now. And look, there's other mini leagues I'd like to win, but I'm not really that pushed about them. For most people, I think mini leagues should be the driving factor. Right? I know these days our overall rank is talked about a lot and stuff like that, but honestly, who really cares? Like, yeah, okay, it might be helpful if you run a YouTube channel or a podcast or something like that, I think most people start playing the game because of a mini league. No one says, do you know what? I'd love a top 50,000 finish. I'm going to start playing FPL. No, you want to win a work league or a school league or a uni league or, one with your mates, whatever it might be. And I feel like that's kind of what gets people into FPL. And that should be the priority for most people. But obviously, it's completely up to you. If you've just finished top 10K for 2 seasons in a row, your priority might be to try and do that for a 3rd season in a row. If you've never finished inside the top 100K and you're close, that could be your priority. It's completely up to you. I think for the majority of the season, it doesn't change your transfer decisions anyway, but it might do for the last 3 weeks. So choose what you want to prioritize and just go from there. So just quickly on my team, I'm still planning to roll the transfer into double game week 37. I want to be as flexible as possible going into the biggest game week remaining this season. I am recording this before most of the press conferences, so there is a chance I could be forced into a move, but things are looking pretty good at the moment. Unless Pep Guardiola completely rules Ederson out, I think I'm going to start him this week because it seems like a low-risk move. Because if he starts, great. They're not going to risk him unless he's perfectly fine to play. And I think Wolves at home is better than West Ham at home for Petrovic. And if Ortega starts, I'd have to get really unlucky for Ederson to be on the bench and Ortega to pick up an injury. If Ortega starts the game, he's going to finish it. So Petrovic will come on. I guess if I want to play really safe, I'll just start Petrovic. But right now I've got Ederson there. Even with the Fabian Schär injury news, I'm still going to play Davern because I just think them against Burnley away is more chance of a clean sheet than Man United against Palace away. There is a slight temptation to play Dalot because he's more attacking. But I think I'm going to stick with Davern. It's Gabriel and Saliba, the other 2 defenders. Just makes perfect sense to play them. Palmer, West Ham at home, good. I'm currently playing Gordon. Palmer at home, West Ham at home, good. That's such great analysis, by the way. I'm currently playing Gordon against Burnley. I've just got this. I mean, he's a good option anyway, right? But I've just got this feeling that Newcastle's away form is going to look a lot better once they've played the Burnley and Man United defences. And it just feels like one of those, if I bench Gordon, he goes off on one, it'll just feel really stupid. Whereas I've got Bruno Fernandes literally sat there with a flag right now. I can just use that as an excuse, even though I'm like 99% certain Fernandes will start. On Son, he is a little bit worrying his performances recently. And if I was basing my Game Week 36 decisions solely off what happened in Game Week 35, I'd probably bench him because he hasn't looked great over the 2 games. But I feel like he will get chances against Liverpool, especially on that left side. I don't think Trent is terrible defensively or anything like that. I think it's over-exaggerated. But he does like to get forward. Son will have some space there. I think he will. And obviously he's on penalties and his minutes are pretty much guaranteed. Even if he plays on the left and Richarlison through the middle again, I don't think it's really a massive issue. Ultimately, whoever I bench this week, it's a tough decision. It's between Son, Gordon and Fernandes for me. I've got no interest in benching Jackson. He's a differential. It's a good fixture and his minutes look great right now. And he will get chances. I'm just hoping to get lucky that he finishes them like he did last night with the header. I mean, it was pretty much an open goal, but still, right? We've seen Jackson miss chances like that before. So I definitely want to play him because it's a home game. If Jackson was away, I'd probably bench him over the other 3, but I'm just going to take the chance on him at home. And right now I'm benching Fernandes. I don't know. Like, obviously you should take into account what's happened this season and recently, but I think when I think about Son as an FPL option, I just picture this great asset that's got great minutes, on penalties, always get chances, great finisher, and like you just never bench him, so it feels difficult to do. But obviously you wouldn't usually bench Fernandes either. Now this is going to go down to the deadline. I'm not going to have a better... There's going to be no more information that helps me decide this. It's almost coin flip territory, and that is what I would probably suggest people do. Because often when you flip a coin and you say, okay, if it's heads, it's Son, tails, it's Fernandes, once you flip the coin, you know what you want it to land on. That's the player you should pick. I just don't feel like I can bench Son. I feel like I'm happier to bench Fernandes than I am with Son, but I don't really know why. Everyone else looks good. Haaland captain, Foden vice captain, Isak obviously up front as well. Team looks pretty good. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and rate 5 stars on podcast. Obviously, I usually do this video after press conferences, but not possible today because of the Friday deadline. Anything major that comes up, I'll discuss in the deadline stream later today, which will probably start at 4:30 p.m. UK time ahead of the 6:30 p.m. UK time deadline. So I'll see you then. Good luck this weekend. We'll do it all again for Game Week 37 next week.